The war left Berlin in ruins, and its division turned the city into a stage where two rival systems competed, not just with weapons, but with architecture. Under Stalin, East Berlin's first post-war buildings weren't modernist glass boxes. They were monumental, classicist, and designed to impress. The style borrowed from Berlin's own 19th century traditions, but scaled up into something far more imposing. The very first project after 1945 was the Soviet Embassy on Unter den Linden. Built between 1950 and 1952, it rose on the ruins of Berlin's old 18th century embassy. This wasn't just another building, it set the tone for the entire GDR. In the so-called national tradition style, it reinterpreted Berlin classicism, but with the scale and confidence of Stalinist architecture. The embassy even broke Berlin's own rules. It was the only building allowed to exceed the city's strict height limits and push its entrance back from the street. Its location gave it symbolic weight, a piece of Soviet power right in the heart of Berlin. And yes, filming it may have got me on some kind of list. Not long after, East Berlin launched its biggest prestige project, the Stalinallee. Stretching from Strausberger Platz to Frankfurter Tor, it was meant to prove the superiority of the socialist system through architecture. The style? Socialist classicism, like Moscow's Seven Sisters or Warsaw's Palace of Culture, but with Berlin's own classical details. Columns, friezes, symmetry, all made bigger and more monumental. These weren't ordinary flats. The slogan was, "Palaces for the people." Spacious apartments with hot water, central heating, stucco ceilings, elevators, shops and restaurants on the ground floor. Workers who put in 300 hours of labor clearing rubble could enter a lottery to live here. Unsurprisingly, demand was huge. The boulevard itself was 90 meters wide, built not only for traffic, but for parades and military processions. Every stone was meant to project power and confidence. In the West, the socialist classicism was mockingly known as Zuckerbäcker-Stil, wedding cake style, because of its over-the-top ornamentation. But styles changed quickly. After Stalin's death, Khrushchev denounced the waste of ornament. Suddenly, socialist classicism was out. The second phase of the boulevard, by then renamed Karl-Marx-Allee, introduced modernist housing blocks, along with cultural icons like Café Moskau, Kino Kosmos, and Kino International. By 1960, when the Frankfurter Tor was finished, the ornate Stalin-era buildings were already considered outdated, almost an embarrassment. Today, Karl-Marx-Allee is still one of Berlin's most iconic streets, a living monument to Cold War rivalry, a reminder of the GDR's ambitions and contradictions, and a proof that in Berlin, even architecture was a battlefield of competing ideologies. Alexanderplatz became the showcase for what came next, the modernist era. In the 1960s and 70s, ornament was out, functionality was in, clean lines instead of decoration, glass and concrete instead of marble. The house of the teacher, wrapped with Walter Womacker's massive mosaic of an idealist socialist light. The house of travel, home of the state travel agency, offering glossy brochures of a world most East Germans would never actually see. The house of the Berlin Press and its glowing press cafe, built to rival Axel Springer's tower in the West. And the house of electro industry, once the Ministry of Electronics. But modernism had its trade-offs. While the Karl-Marx-Allee gave you trees and a boulevard designed for show, Alexanderplatz gave you paving stones. A vast, windswept square that often feels more like a concrete desert than a public space. Even today, many Berliners complain about it. There are endless proposals to redesign the square or to tear down some of its buildings and replace them with housing. And yet, for all its austerity, Alexanderplatz tells its own story. It marks the GDR's shift after Stalin, away from marble palaces toward utility, architecture not built for eternity, but for necessity, a clean break with the past, written in steel, glass, and concrete. If Alexanderplatz showed the GDR's modernist city center, the Fernsehturm, Berlin's TV tower, became its ultimate emblem. At over 360 meters, it's still the tallest building in Germany. At first glance, it looks like a triumph, bold and futuristic, a proud statement of East German engineering and socialist ambition. But behind the steel and glass is a story of delays, compromises, and contradictions. The tower was to be built at Alexanderplatz. The Fernsehturm was meant to replace the Grand Central Tower, a socialist classicist government skyscraper. That original version was scrapped due to financial difficulties of the regime, which resulted mainly from the high costs of building the Berlin Wall and difficulties with importing needed materials after the closure of the borders to West Berlin. This was socialism in a nutshell. Due to the efforts to keep its people locked in and take away their freedoms, they were not able to construct a government palace that would have been used to show off its dominance of the socialist system. And then came another twist. On sunny days, the tower throws back a glowing reflection in the shape of a cross. Berliners call it the Pope's Revenge, a cosmic jab at an atheist regime that demolished over 60 churches and suppressed religion. What the GDR saw as a triumph became a symbol not just of socialist ambition, but also of the contradictions and failures that define the GDR. For most people, daily life took shape in more modest projects, like the apartment towers along Leipziger Straße. Construction began in 1969. Over the next decade, high-rises stretched along both sides of the street. Shops, restaurants, and cultural centers were supposed to fill the ground floors, while 2,000 new apartments rose above. The vision was ambitious: a social city center where living, working, and leisure blended together, a planned answer to capitalist downtowns. But reality looked different. Many storefronts sat empty. The wide promenades felt bleak. Diplomats, journalists, and even Westerners moved in, putting the area under constant Stasi surveillance. A popular rumor suggests that the complex was also designed to block views of the Axel Springer high-rise and its illuminated news signs in West Berlin. Next door, the Ernst Thälmann Park, a self-contained neighborhood where residents had both nature and infrastructure within walking distance. Not every building in East Berlin fit neatly into the story of socialist housing blocks or monumental boulevards. Some projects stood out, bold, strange, and almost otherworldly. One of the best examples is the Czech Embassy. Completed in 1978, its pure brutalism, its futuristic, floating form earned it nicknames like the UFO. But the Czech Embassy remains a striking reminder that even within the rigid framework of socialist planning, there was still room for architectural ambition. East German architecture focused on functionality, housing blocks, prefabricated slabs. But in the final years of the GDR, things shifted. The regime wanted prestige. It wanted to impress outsiders, especially Western visitors, and to earn hard currency through tourism. The Westin Grand Hotel captured this ambition. Built in a revival of socialist classicism, its monumental facades echoed Stalin-era grandeur, but with a twist of international elegance. It was about sending a message to Western guests. Just a few streets away, the Friedrichstadt Palast told a similar story, but in a different style. Completed in 1984, it became the GDR's showpiece for culture and entertainment. A dazzling example of socialist postmodernism, the Westin Grand and Friedrichstadt Palast marked a late attempt by the GDR to project prestige and confidence to the outside world. But behind the glittering facades, East Germany remained what it had always been: isolated, fragile, and struggling to survive. Walking Berlin's streets, you realize something important. The battle for ideas, for identity, and for memory isn't abstract. It's built into the very cities we live in, and the lessons of the past are still relevant today, and will also stay relevant in the future.